Hi, I'm Dan Branton. Welcome to the ConneXion podcast series. Today we are recording part 2 of the series of sessions with Mike Introna from MI Associates. Following our last session where Mike was talking about some of the impacts of COVID and staff operating levels within the UK corrugated industry. Today we're going to sit down and have a look at some of the market consolidation that's been taking place and looking at ways that businesses can get themselves ready for a possible acquisition, as well as looking at some of the implications of Brexit. Mike, welcome back. Following our session last week, where we were looking at various aspects of the UK corrugated industry, there's been some fascinating developments over the last 10 days or so. We saw the announcement that VPK have gone through the process of acquiring Encase, and Mike, it brings up sort of two very interesting points that I'd like to chat to you about today. And one of them is obviously the bold move from VPK to actually increase their market share in the UK. And that then sort of leads neatly on to what's going on with Brexit as well, because do you have a sort of a feeling or an overview that some of the larger European organisations are looking to sort of shore up their opportunities in the UK?
I think that, if, in all honesty, I think it's probably inevitable. I think some of the bigger groups, we've seen Schumacher recently come into the UK market. I think there are some other players out there that might want to, establish a presence and a foothold in the UK, or just a presence. But yeah, I think it's inevitable, Dan.
Because it was quite interesting, because obviously VPK, they used to be known as Rigid. Obviously they've gone through a rebranding, which obviously in its own right is quite interesting, because one of the USPs of VPK for many years was having this autonomous identity within each of the countries and territories that they were operating. You looked at obviously Angelis in France and Rigid within the UK, Peterson's up in Scandinavia. But they've obviously now consolidated that brand all under VPK, and they've made a big move with this Encase acquisition. Now, Mike, you've got some fascinating insight, because obviously you were a director of a business that got acquired by a multinational when you were at TRM. Obviously the big move came from DS Smith acquiring that business, and all the changes that went with it. But is it quite a daunting prospect when you're a sort of single site, privately owned business, when you get a big company looking at you?
It was, I mean, we had a number of people looking at us, but I think both the interesting and the real challenging times came once an agreement had been reached. It's all very exciting up until the point of coming to an agreement, and when Mr. Morn, finally agreed a heads of terms with DS Smith, then it was all great. Everybody's happy, but then you move into the real challenging phase of the due diligence process, which doesn't need any underestimation from anyone, because that can be a real challenge to everyone in the business.
So Mike, you're talking about that process of due diligence, and I'm sure for some of the sort of smaller privately owned businesses, they're just looking at the balance sheet and the performance of the business and possibly think that it's just a standard, straightforward multiplier. But you've obviously proved that there's an awful lot of pre-planning, financial awareness, as well as all of, getting the business ready for due diligence. Where does one even start with that?
Well, I think you would start just as you would if you were doing anything with your business. If you were looking at some significant investment, or you just wanted some financial support, or you wanted to enter into some financial arrangement with anyone, you've got to get your business plan right, because you're going to go to a potential partner, be it the bank or someone else, or someone that wants to buy your business, and they want to see a business plan. And certainly in the current climate, then that's even more challenging. It's quite interesting. I did some work recently with an associate of mine who's was quite recently an area director for HSB Business Banking, and we were talking through some of the do's and don'ts, and quite clearly there's some things you need in terms of a business plan, and then there's some thinking to go down in terms of due diligence and any work prior to that. So if you were looking at your business plan, you need a clear executive summary that really should be right at the forefront of your business plan. It should be compelling. It ought to be revealing about the company's vision, its mission statement, its core values, and where it operates in terms of where its products and services are. If it's someone that is potentially new as a banking partner, or potentially a company coming in and looking for an acquisition that's new to corrugated or new to packaging, because it happens where people are wanting to diversify, then tell them about some of your experience and in the industry and some of the successes. I think there needs to be a clear company description that gives key information about oneself, one's customers, one's goals. You need a description of your management and organisation. And then some analysis of your customer base in terms of your sector or segment analysis, and why you operate in those areas, where you see potential for growth, where you see potential for value improvement. I think also too many people don't pay enough attention to the competition. Where are the competition operating? Some of the businesses I've been speaking to over the last few months, one of the questions I'll say is, who's your biggest competitor? Why? If you're thinking about operating in that market, what's going to be the knock-on effect? Who's going to see that as a challenge? Who might look at that and might want to respond? I think you need a breakdown in products and services. You need to have a demonstrable marketing plan. So again, some analysis to back that up. Why are you looking in these sort of areas? And also your sales strategy along with your marketing plan. Important for the current climate is COVID and Brexit implications. What are the things that you've got in place to enable you to be more flexible, to mitigate any changes? What are the things that you can do in terms of, we've just seen local lockdowns that are happening potentially at 24 hours in some cases in the last few months. If you've suddenly got an issue either with people can't get to work, or they're ill and can't get to work for that reason, how are you going to operate? What are the contingencies that you've got in place? In terms of any request for funding, or if you're looking at the partner who's maybe looking to acquire, what are you going to do? What are the next things? What are you going to do with the funding? What are the next steps for the business? If a purchaser came in, where might they be looking to spend the money and investment? And as you said, you've already mentioned VPK and Encase. I think it's a great opportunity for both parties. Really, really do. Because VPK are known for investing heavily and in the right things that are very customer focused, and also investing in their infrastructure and people. And I think that, as I said, it's a great match that they're in there with Encase. In terms of financial information, any bank, any prospective purchaser is going to want to see your financials, and they're going to want to see them for a number of years, and they're going to want to see projections, and that will go across all areas of the business. It won't just be the finances. It will be, look, what are you paying to suppliers? What's your historical data in terms of manufacturing, productivity, etc. They're going to want to see trends, so that when you present them with maybe this year's set of accounts, they're not a one-off. They're not an outlier from what you've historically, sometimes it is hysterical, isn't it? What you've historically been achieving. And what can also be a real help is if you can put some SWOT analysis in there as well to support your view of the business, and looking both internally and externally at that. In the current climate, you might want to look at some of the pestle and pest analysis tools, because obviously there's so many dynamics going around at the moment, and there's plenty of online tools that can help you as a business just review, be it economic factors or political factors, social factors, environmental, all those sort of things that can impact on the business at the moment. So that's sort of the business plan in essence. And without trying to teach people how to suck eggs, some people are good at that, and some people, would be doing it for the first time in a serious way. Some people may be going for some serious investment to the bank for the first time, and if you're going to a bank asking for 6 figures, 7 figures, or even more, then whilst the banks are keen to lend money in the right places at the moment, when I talk to the banks, they're also very, very wary about where they're going to place that money. So there's a lot of analysis done by the banks in terms of contingency and the risks associated with any money that they're lending out. Prior to sale, as I say, it's one thing getting a heads of terms agreement, but before even doing that, where are you as a business? What are your systems like for safety? What are your sustainability systems? What are you like for service, quality, waste, hygiene, people management and training? You know, how do you self-audit? Can you self-audit? Can you do a self-analysis? Can you do a process map of your business? Can you benchmark your company within the industry or amongst others? Certainly in some of the trade federations, there are helpful links where you can perhaps benchmark and self-audit and people that can help you to do that. These will go a long way towards any potential buyer's thinking. So it's not just turnover, profit, EBITDA, etc. It's not just return on capital employed. They'll want to see some of this other data, and they'll want to see it for a number of years prior to their interest once you get into the due diligence phase. But if you've got some of that up front, it shows as a business that you are organised and well structured.
And Mike, can I just ask you one question? Sorry to interrupt, but you actually hit on a point that I think is quite important in terms of sometimes the individual who owns the business can sometimes see it that they're just too close to it. So talk a little bit about the importance of actually having that support mechanism, that team around you, to actually help drive that sale process through. Because sometimes you just take it all too personally, and you can find a deal falls over just because you're maybe not the right character to actually sell that business.
I think one of the things that you'll find in any due diligence process, if you agree ahead of terms, is just how challenging it will be, because most companies will then employ some intermediary to act on their behalf to audit your business in absolute fine detail. And what you're going to need is a senior member of your team to lead that. And I would suggest, with all the greatest respect, that often the business owner may not be the right person to lead it. He's obviously got to be there to make decisions and come to agreements and on certain matters. But these intermediaries are essentially going to be there to chip away at the price. They're going to be there to make sure the company is what they believe they're buying. But where they find things that aren't right, they're going to chip away at the price. And it doesn't matter what you've said at handshake. You know, if they find things that are not what they believe they should be, then they're either going to potentially walk away or start looking at what are the cost implications of putting that right, or the cost implications of it just not being there. So often, I'm sorry FDs for saying this, but usually I would respectfully suggest that your lead financial person in your business is the person that heads it up. Now that throws up other challenges within the business, because a due diligence process can take months, and that means that you've got your head of finance potentially taking anything like 80% of it, his or her time, doing something else. So it needs additional support within your business. But once you do get into that process, yeah, it can be very challenging. It can be infuriating at times. It can get emotionally very stressful. You know, you've got people coming in and they're challenging you about how you run your business. They're doing it for the right reasons, but sometimes when you're trying to run a business as well, it's not always easy to distance yourself from the reality of someone's just doing an analysis. And if they're finding things that are not right, they're not right. And you know, it's hard sometimes when you've had a bad day as a production director or even a business owner, sales manager, to sometimes not get emotional about something and sometimes get a little bit defensive. So having a level head at the helm and leading those discussions with the intermediaries is what I would heartily recommend.
Mike, I'd like to come back to one of the points we were discussing at the beginning, consolidation. Do you think there's still opportunities? Because I mean, obviously, when you look back, and you've been in the industry probably longer than I have, but it seems to go in waves, doesn't it? And it seems to sort of run on 6, 7, 8 year cycles where it's all looking rosy, and then suddenly there's a raft of acquisitions and consolidations. Do you think there's more to come?
I do. I think that with any dynamic situation environment like we've got now, there's churn. I think, sadly, some businesses will always struggle in these situations, and that gives opportunities for others to come in and make acquisitions. Some businesses will feel that they've got a great plan for dealing with the current environment and what they believe to be the future market that's out there, and then believe that, well, what we need to do is to be able to grow, and if they haven't got the infrastructure within their existing portfolio of businesses or within their existing site, they're going to look to acquire. And then you've got people from abroad, and it's not just within Europe. I'm certainly aware of a couple of organisations in North America that are looking at the UK at the moment. I've certainly spoke to a couple, 3, 4 business owners and people that are interested in acquisitions. And I don't say that in any way other than it's a point of fact. And there'll be many, many people in the industry that know people who are interested in looking at potential acquisitions. So I don't think that's any secret. But yeah, I think that further consolidation is inevitable. And I still think there's potentially some to come within the UK.
And if you look at the top segment of the market, where you've got your big players, the Smurfit Kappas, the DS Smiths, the Saigas, etc., they're hitting up on the ceiling already in terms of their market shares. So do you feel that it's going to be more in that sort of the middle and the lower tiers where all of this activity might take place?
I think that's most likely. I think with the big groups, I think if in any situation the right acquisition came along, I think then they'd look at it and then and take advantage if they thought it was right for them. That potentially has knock-on effects for them if they had to divest themselves of something else. But I think most likely it's in that middle tier. I think some of the larger independents, whether they're in the UK or particularly abroad, I think they're growing, they're hungry. As we've said, Schumacher have entered the UK, and what a great business they are. I went around their plant in one of their plants in Germany, and it's just amazing, an amazing organisation. So the company's in safe hands when a company like Schumacher comes along. Other than that, yeah, it's. I think it's going to be an interesting year ahead. Certainly the next 6 months. And
do you think as an industry, have we really got a handle on the ramifications of Brexit, or is it still very much up in the air and we're almost writing the story as it's going?
I think possibly the key thing for us is what happens on tariffs for raw materials. I mean, by and large, the products that we sell are retained within the UK and Ireland, but they're retained within the British Isles. There's not much exporting of corrugated product, maybe more so in some of the higher quality print areas and the like. But I think raw materials is the key issue. The other key issue for us and also for business owners is the changes to the right to work rules, and engaging people who are not already living in the UK from the European Union, etc. Because you've now got to acquire a license from the government to be able to bring people into your business, and they've got to score a certain amount of points on the new scoring system. So that may be a challenge as well, particularly for some of the sheep plants that are used to using shorter term or temporary labour, or sometimes foreign labour that come into the UK.
Yeah, I think that's an important point there, Mike, because you are right. I mean, we are a manufacturing industry, and in certain parts of the market, it's still very labour intensive. Do you feel that this is also an investment opportunity in terms of looking at how to automate plants, so good opportunities for increasing output from the case makers by putting decent pre-feeders and palletizers, etc. Do you think it's an opportunity that the UK industry should be really grasping with both hands?
I think so. I think so. I mean, we brushed on it last time, but there are clearly automation opportunities. And there are also opportunities to improve your infrastructure through improving your people and getting your people on board, and the way that you bring your people along with your company's message of what you're trying to achieve, and get everybody, operating in the same direction and with that desire to really want to achieve. And you can certainly see some great productivity gains just by getting the employee engagement right. But certainly from an automation point of view, and it doesn't have to be millions of pounds. As you say, a pre-feeder, and you take off on a machine. Some very simple things can help you improve significantly what you're doing in your business. Waste is another one. I mean, waste management is historically in the UK, dare I say, it's poor. It's poor. There's plenty of box plants operating within 8% upwards, and some of them upwards of double figures. That's a lot of money. And if we're going to start seeing tariffs on incoming paper, then there's going to be even more focus in that area.
So Mike, quite interesting that you talk about waste management there. Obviously, you through your association with DS Smith when you were working for them after the acquisition of TRM, what did that expose you to in terms of having a look at the performance of some of the DS Smith operations throughout Europe? Because you said, historically the UK is quite bad. Can you sort of give a bit more description behind that statement?
I think within the UK, I don't think it's fair to talk about in individual companies, but I think generally within the UK, if we're honest about waste, production waste is often understated, and it is often around the 9-10% mark. And I don't think that's uncommon. Some of your volume sites are clearly lower than that. They're geared up for running long production runs, and they're geared up for fast operation, and they utilise the corrugated decals particularly well. But that said, there are opportunities in virtually every plant that I've been in to improve where you are on waste, whether that's the way that we handle the reels when they come into the business, whether it's the way that we handle the reels when we put them on the corrugator, whether it's the way that we set up our converting machines and run 2 or 3 bundles rather than 2 or 3 boxes. And let's make no mistake, some companies are pretty good at this, but there's quite a number that have the opportunity to improve in those areas, certainly. And even simple things like just explaining to your workforce how much waste costs. I can certainly remember doing an exercise with one site, and we just explained to them that, if a reel comes into your corrugator on average twice in its lifetime, and you save just 1 wrap when you put it on the corrugator. So this is before we do anything else. The saving in paper alone was something, if I remember right, £27,000 a year. And if you were to actually sell that product that you were wasting, then you're increasing that by another 50%. And, once people see what difference they can make, then, and get them on board with wanting to make a difference, then that itself can do a lot of good. But what we do find is that often the analysis of waste is maybe something that can be improved in a lot of sites. And there are other factors that contribute, whether it's other raw materials like the way that we use our starch, or the condition, or just the operating conditions for machines. And again, this is where automation can help you. If we establish what operating conditions should be, we can put systems in place to measure and make sure that the operating factors within machines are kept in the ideal range. And whether that's raw materials, whether that's heat, whether that's whether that's temperatures, whatever it might be, but settings essentially, then that can have a tremendous impact on your overall waste in site. And we've seen that. I've seen people put systems like that in place and see an up to 2% reduction in waste, and more is available to some.
Great. Well, Mike, thank you so much indeed. I think it brings us nicely to the end of this session. And obviously, we will look forward to catching up with you again in the next week or so. We've got plenty of other things that we want to be looking at, I know. One of the areas that we will probably be looking at on our next session will be the sort of financing side of the business, getting yourself ready for maybe machinery investments, how to work with your banks to affect that effectively. And Mike, thank you so much indeed. It's been an absolute pleasure, and we'll look forward to catching up very soon.
Okay, thanks, Dan. And just say to everybody, we're in lockdown again. Stay safe, and everyone take care.